My name is Pastor Corey. I get to be the lead pastor here at Westwinds. If I have not had the chance to meet you, I would love to meet you actually before we leave today. I'm always in the lobby. It'd be so good to shake your hand and say hello. As has been mentioned, we are on a bit of a journey together called Lent, a journey that we are on with churches around the globe. And this Sunday in Lent is called Oculi, which is to see. And so at this stop on the pilgrimage, every year, people around the globe pause to wonder, to contemplate, in what ways might we need to learn to see again, or have our eyes opened to what God might be doing in us and through us and around us again. And so this is where we're going to kind of dwell in today. Before we do that, I want to take a few minutes today and talk a little bit about the influencers in our life. Now, I read a stat today, and just to be clear, I don't believe any stats I read anymore, but I read this article this morning that actually was saying that they were interviewing like Gen Z kids, and 57% of them said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" They said, "I want to be an influencer." What is that? Like, how do you, like, an influencer in what? I don't know, I just want to be an influencer, right? So we live in a time when influencers are big in our life. They're important to our kids, and they have a lot of stake in our lives too, I think. So I want to try something today. So you all got a piece of paper when you came in. Flip to the side that has nothing written on it, and there's pens around. Let me say this, if you're quicker with writing with your thumbs, open your phone and open up a fresh note. We're going to take about 90 seconds, and here's what I want us to do. I want us to write down as many influencers in our life that we can think of. So I got a slide here to help us. So who are your influencers? Think about maybe books you read, social media, people you follow on social media, maybe emails you subscribe to. Think about articles that you get or news sources you look at. You can think categorically, like we got like financial influencers, religious influencers. We got influencers in business. Maybe you got influencers that help you understand world affairs, what's going on in the world. You got influencers in politics. There's like all kinds of fitness and health influencers, mental health influencers. There's a lot of different categories out there. And David, can we play some music here and kind of help this out a little bit? Okay, I'm gonna count to 90 in my head. And I want you to write down as many influencers in your life as you can. There will be a prize at the end. I'm lying, there won't be, but please do this, okay? Ready, set, go. As many as you can, write them down, go. Keep going, you're doing great. Thirty seconds. Keep going. Keep going. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pens down. All right. Anybody write down 5 names? Five influencers. Okay, a few of you. Okay, anybody have 10? Anybody have 15? Okay. All right, we got a few. Okay, that's good. So I want to take a moment here. Now, you can flip that page over. We're going to come back to that later. Now, I want to take a moment and I talk a little bit about what it looks like and what it means to follow Jesus. Ultimately, Lent is this invitation to follow Jesus to and through the cross. And this little activity we did is going to help us maybe understand why some of these following Jesus texts are written the way they are. We're going to look at maybe 2 of the maybe more known ones or popular ones or maybe the more obvious ones. But in Matthew chapter 4, Jesus is asked some fellows to come follow him. Let's look at this. Matthew chapter 4, starting in verse 18. As Jesus walked alongside the Galilee Sea, he saw 2 brothers, Simon, who is called Peter and Andrew throwing fishing nets into the sea because they were fishermen. Now I want to pause there just for a minute and notice a couple things in this text. One is it lets you know where they were, and it lets you know what their vocation was, right? They were by the Sea of Galilee and they were fishermen. In this time, there was no newspapers or televisions or social media. So people's influences came from the places in which they lived, right? And then the people they ran with, right? And so in this case, fishermen were kind of rougher people, right? It was a job that not a lot of people wanted to have. You can imagine being a fisherman in a time before there was common hygiene, right? Jesus says to them, "Come follow me." He said, "I'll show you how to fish for people." Right away, they left their nets and followed him. Continuing on, they saw another set of brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with Zebedee, their father. So here again, identifying some of the influencers in these fishermen's life, right? These are fishermen who learned to fish from who? Their father, right? So Jesus is calling them to leave their profession and their father and come and follow him. Jesus called them and immediately left their boat and their father and followed him. Matthew, if you keep going, Matthew chapter 9, there's another calling of a disciple to follow Jesus. As Jesus continued on from there, that there is Capernaum. Capernaum is where Jesus did the majority of his ministry. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at a kiosk for collecting taxes. So again, he's in Capernaum, and this man, Matthew, is collecting taxes. His job was to collect taxes from Jews to give those taxes to Rome. But Matthew is from Capernaum and is Jewish, okay? So again, Matthew now is influenced from his life of being from Capernaum, but now Matthew is being influenced by who? Rome, right? So Rome has now taken over the area and is influencing Matthew. He said to him, "Follow me," and he got up and followed him. As Jesus sat down to eat in Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners joined Jesus at the table. I just love that line. Many tax collectors and sinners joined Jesus at his table. It has nothing to do with the sermon. I just really love that line, right? What I love about these callings, right, these moments, is following Jesus implied that you would leave something to come and follow Jesus. That you've got these influences, this worldview shaped by Capernaum, shaped by being Jewish. You've got this life that has been handed to you by your parents or your father. You have this worldview that is shaped by Rome, and you've made all of these choices based on these influences and influencers in your life. And Jesus comes along and I want you to leave this and come and follow me. Still not a real experience that many of us have had in our life, right? Most of us have not had this kind of tangible invitation before. But this would have been some common, some commonalities with ancient Judaism. If you were to read the Old Testament scriptures, there's these moments throughout the text where God's people, some of the heroes of the Jewish faith, were invited to leave their lives to go and follow Yahweh, follow God somewhere else. Exodus chapter 3 is one of these heroes, a man named Moses, who was sent to go and lead God's people out of slavery. Maybe you know this story. Exodus chapter 3 says this: "One day, while Moses was taking care of the sheep and goats of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, he led the flock across the desert and came to Sinai, the holy mountain." So Moses' greatest influence right now in his life is Jethro, who both owns the farm and is a priest where? In Midian. Again, influencers in the way his worldview works. There, an angel of the Lord appeared to him as a flame coming from the middle of a bush. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but was not burning up. In case you didn't know, the Bible wants you to know that this is strange. Real strange. Why isn't the bush burning up? I will go closer and see. Wouldn't you? Oh my goodness, this is wild. When the Lord saw that Moses was coming closer, he called to him from the middle of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses, he answered, yes, here I am. God said, don't come any closer. Take off your sandals because you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your ancestors. Listen to how God lists his influencers. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God of your heroes. I am the God of those that have gone before you, that you look to shape and mold your life. Moses covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. God goes on to say, I have indeed heard the cry of my people, and I see how the Egyptians are oppressing them. Now I am sending you to the king of Egypt so that you can lead my people out of his country. This idea that Moses would then leave the life that he has. He'd walk away from the worldview that he has. This invitation to go with Yahweh to somewhere else. But actually, it's even more ancient than Moses. Before Moses was this guy named Abraham, sometimes referred to in Genesis as Abram. In Genesis chapter 12, the Lord said to Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, leave your country, your relatives, and your father's home, and go to the land that I'm going to show you. Leave everything you know. Leave everything that has shaped your world and go where I will show you. I will give you many descendants, and they will become a great nation. I will bless you and make your name famous. Abraham, you, my friend, are going to be an influencer so that you will be a blessing. But it actually goes back to be even more ancient than Abraham, to the earliest texts of our scriptures, where God creates everything we can see and everything beyond what we can see. And in the midst of that, he creates human, Adam. And Adam is given this task to name all the animals and name everything that's happening in this garden that God has created. And then God says to Adam, this is not what you are to cling to. This is not what you're going to tie yourself to. And he creates woman, Eve, and says for Adam to leave here and go and be united with her. Actually, in the text, this is what it says, that is why man leaves his father and mother, and he's united to his wife, and they become one. The very first calling on humanity is to leave one thing and go to another. Another just side note, this is still some of the best marriage advice that I think exists on the planet. That if you want to have a good marriage, you're going to have to leave some things in your past life. You're going to have to maybe leave your family of origin and be united in this new family and build this new way of life. You're going to have to maybe let go of some of the worldviews that have been passed on to you through your biological family and begin to create a new life, a new worldview, new value system with your new family. That's a side note, different sermon, you're welcome. As you follow the text, it had long been a core concept that being of Yahweh, a person of the Most High God, that you leave what you possess to go where Yahweh would have you go and to be with the people that God would have you, that Yahweh would have you be with. So is it any clearer to you how we might follow Jesus today? Me either, right? It still seems so foreign, this idea of how do we follow Jesus today? And I think what's so hard for us to even imagine this is because this long list that we wrote on the other sides of those pages. That how can we even define where our worldview comes from? How can we even define what actually influences our life? I mean, these lists that we have are really, really long, that we've become these translocal hoarders of teachers and rabbis in our life. And then this year comes along, this Lenten season comes along every year and says, hey, want to follow Jesus? You're like, sure. How do I do that? I don't know if you feel it. I do. disoriented in the world that we live in today. There's so many voices, so many polls, so many directions. How do I follow Jesus here and now? One of the things that's interesting about Lent, I think really helpful about Lent, is that it leads us all the way to some really disorienting moments that Jesus' disciples were in. In John chapter 16, Jesus is sitting with his disciples, and he knows he's about to leave them, that there's a season coming when he's not going to be physically with them anymore, and they're going to be left wondering, then who do we follow? Or how do we continue to follow Jesus when Jesus isn't physically present? John chapter 16, Jesus says this to his disciples. He says, I have much more to say to you, but you can't handle it right now. You want the truth? However, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you in all truth. He won't speak on his own. He will say whatever he hears, and it will proclaim to you what is to come. He will glorify me because he will take what is mine and proclaim it to you. Everything that the Father has is mine. That's why I said that the Spirit takes what is mine and will proclaim it to you. Soon, he says, you won't be able to see me. Soon, you won't be able to see me. But soon after that, you will see me. What's Jesus saying here? They don't get it, but we know the rest of the story. That soon, they're going to be confused. How do we do this? We can't see what you're doing, Jesus. How do we live this Jesus-centered life? How do we follow you when we literally can't walk around with you? And what Jesus is saying, there's going to be this Spirit that will come. And the Spirit will proclaim to you everything that is me. Soon, he says, you will see me again. About 20 years ago, I had the privilege, and I would call it a privilege, of being invited into some conversations about technology and the rate in which technology is progressing and the effect that is having and will continue to have on Christian people, on the church, on what it means to follow Jesus. Back then, I remember we were having these conversations about this shift that was happening that was really like a shift that we've never seen before in history. That for the first time in history, things like this were happening. Mothers were learning how to dress from their daughters. That forever, daughters learned how to dress from their mothers. But nowadays, moms don't look like moms. They look like teenagers, right? And sons were learning how to use life tools from their fathers forever. But now, all of a sudden, fathers were needing to learn how to use these tools from their sons. The amount of times I've had to get my parents out of some scam because they've clicked on a link or answered a call or responded to a text, right? That I've had to teach them how to use these tools that are really important for life. Back then, there was conversations about how is this going to affect the world we live in? How is this going to affect the way we understand what it means to follow Jesus? How is this going to affect the way our churches relate to each other? One of the books I was reading back then, this is a book, it's called Flickering Pixels. It was first written in 2006. This guy named Shane Hipps, his career was in like selling Porsches. He was in marketing. And then he became a Mennonite pastor. And if you know anything about Mennonites, that is a wild vocation change, right? And he began writing his observations about what he thought the church wasn't seeing about how marketing works and how technology advancements affect society, and trying to help pastors understand how this was going to affect their churches. So I got privy to some of these conversations. In 2009, he re-released the book called Flickering Pixels to make it a little bit more accessible. So this week, as I was preparing for this message, I pulled this book off my shelf, and I was like, I wonder what this would read like now, right? Almost 20 years later. And I was struck by some of these moments in the text. There's a part here he talks about the illusion of intimacy. Check this out. He says, again, this is almost 20 years ago, right? So first started writing these words. The internet has a natural bias towards exhibitionism, and thus the erosion of real intimacy. the illusion of closeness while remaining anonymous with little risk or demand. It provides just enough connection to keep us from pursuing real intimacy. Virtual community is infinitely more virtual than it is community. It's a bit like cotton candy. It goes down easy and satiates our immediate hunger, but it doesn't provide much in the way of sustainable nutrition. Not only that, but our appetite is spoiled. We no longer feel the need to participate in authentic community. I mean, he's writing these words when Twitter was just this like blue bird, right? That was just starting. When social media was just beginning to spread. And he warns people back then. And here we are years later. Do you think he was right? I do. The book actually walks through the readers like all these kind of different changes in technology that shape the way societies function and work. In one of the sections, he talks about the effect of television on society. And I think this is really interesting in light of how we are today and the life we live today. So again, he's talking about television here. He says the human psyche isn't designed to withstand the full gravity of planetary suffering. Numbness and exhaustion are natural reactions. Feeling helpless and hopeless is nearly inevitable. The heart can only stretch so far, so many times before it is worn thin and wrung dry. This empathy at a distance, over time, if unchecked, this numbness undermines our ability to extend compassion to those in our own city, neighborhood, or even our own homes. The pain of the world experienced through television can keep us from understanding and alleviating the pain we encounter in our daily lives. The task of recalibrating our psyche and reigniting compassion must begin with local relationships. He's talking about TV. I don't know what your life is like, but I'm feeling this, man. Like I wake up in the morning and I reach for my what? Phone. I open my phone and I immediately start reading, but not like in an article, scrolling about all the terrible things happening in the world right now. Scrolling my feeds with angry person after angry person about this or that. And what he's suggesting is that for all of history, until the television came along, people primarily only knew about pain and suffering in their radius. I mean, even when the printing press came along and you'd read about in the newspaper, it was like a day late, maybe 2 days late. And maybe you didn't get to that article yet. But now we live in a time where in the course of one day, you might hear of hundreds of terrible things happening in the world. And what he's saying is it's numbing us. It's actually decreasing our capacity for empathy. I think it's happening to me. I don't know if it's happening to you. And I think maybe this ancient wisdom, this idea that we should acknowledge our influencers, name the things in our life that are pressing, and perhaps hear this Yahweh, this call of Jesus, to maybe reorient our lives and leave some of those things behind. The lands of our fathers and mothers, or perhaps now feels like the land of our children, and follow Jesus and wherever Jesus might lead us. I have much more to say to you, but you can't handle it right now. I feel like that's talking to me. There's so many things that I think Jesus wants to invite me to in my real life, but I'm so bombarded by all of the things happening in the world, I literally can't handle it right now. I can't hear about another thing. I can't make space for people in my life. There's too much going on. However, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you in all truth. He won't speak on his own, but he'll say whatever he hears and proclaim it to you what is to come. He will glorify me because he will take what is mine and proclaim it to you. Everything the Father has is mine. That's why I said that the Spirit takes what is mine and will proclaim it to you. Soon you won't be able to see me, but after that, you will see me. Soon you won't be able to see me. This is what Oculi is all about, acknowledging the ways that we have maybe lost sight of what God is doing in us and through us and around us. But the promise here is that soon we can open up our lives again to this Spirit of truth, that we will begin to see Jesus again. I wanted to maybe offer some help today, a tool. On the other side of that page, there's 4 questions. 4 questions that maybe will help frame a life that is maybe influenced in a different way. The first question is, who are you becoming? And becoming is italicized because the question that we often ask is, who are you? And the reality is who you are has been shaped and formed by the voices that you allow into your life. But I think what Jesus wants to ask is a different focus. It's, who are you becoming? Do you have this sense that you're becoming more into the person that God has called and created you to be? Do you have this sense that you're becoming something more, that you're finding yourself engaging in the kingdom of God and longing for what Jesus wants in your life more? Or are you becoming more fearful, more angry? Are you hating more people? Is your community becoming smaller and smaller and smaller because of what they said or they believe or how they look or how they dress? Who are you becoming? See, the algorithms want to tell you that you're not enough. They want to tell you you're doing it wrong, that you got to think politically this way, and you got to do this in your fitness and this with your finances, and you're always behind and you're always chasing and you're never going to get there. But God wants to tell you that you are a beloved child of God, that he has a plan for your life and wants you to become everything you were called and created to be. The first question is not who are you, but who are you becoming? The second question is, how are your people doing? I think it's important that this word doing is italicized too, because often the question is, how are your people, right? Like, how are your kids doing? Oh, they're doing good. How are your parents doing? Oh, they're good. They're doing great. And what are you really saying? I don't know. I haven't had a real conversation with them in years. I haven't got below the... How are your friends? How's your sister doing? Oh, good. Oh, yeah? But I think the question is, how are your people doing? Do you know? Do you know how the people in your life, the people you love, are doing? I fear that the land we are being called out of is a land where we've lost all capacity to know how the most important people in our life are doing, because we've replaced all that anxiety with this invisible monster of the globe and taking on the anxieties that everyone else says we should have, the algorithms say we should have, and lost the ability to make space for the actual human beings in our life. The third question here is, where are you intentionally present? I think this is really important too. I can ask, where are you? You're like, yeah, I live in Jackson, Michigan. I work here and I live here at the corner of Robinson and McCain. No one else. I don't live here. Okay, just clear that up. That's where are you? What I'm learning more and more in my life, that I'm a lot of places where I'm not. That lots of times I'm somewhere, but my brain is somewhere else. That I'm somewhere, but my heart is somewhere else. That I'm intentionally in a place with other human beings that God is inviting me to know and be with, and I'm losing the capacity to know and be with them. So the question is not, where are you? But where are you on purpose? Where are you intentionally present? The algorithms will direct your attention to everywhere else but where you are. And there's this invitation when following Jesus, not just to maybe leave the land where you are, but to come to this new place where I'm bringing you, where there will also be people where you will be called to be with them too. And the last question, there's no italics. So what might God be inviting you into, which I think is the big question of following Jesus. But this question is last, because if we don't confront who we are becoming, we don't confront our loss of capacity to be with people around us, and if we don't confront the ways in which we're losing a theology of the soil, a theology of the ground, a sense that God is moving in us and through us and around us where we are, if we don't confront those three things, man, it's going to be so difficult to ask the Spirit of God to help us see what God might be inviting us into. Last week, Pastor Phil talked about this passage of scripture in Hebrews chapter 12. It talked about this cloud of witnesses, right? It was this picture of these big Roman Colosseums and these racers in the early forms of the Olympics. And it's saying run the race, don't be hindered, and look to this great cloud of witnesses who are cheering you on. We live in a time when we can't even hear from those cloud of witnesses because all of our witnesses are in the cloud. I came up with that on my own. That's pretty good, huh? That's pretty solid. I thought that was pretty good, right? Thank you very much. That's right, yeah, that's great. Many of us cannot see what God is doing in our lives because our brains, our bank accounts, our souls, our calendars are being pulled in 100 different directions and being guided by 100 different people who we can't see the rest of their lives. We live in a time when someone is good at finance and they're influencing our ethics. We live in a time when someone is good at health and fitness and they're influencing the decisions we make about our calendars with our families. We live in a time when our teachers and rabbis, we cannot hold them accountable because we can't see the rest of their lives. And I think this is a huge problem. That we need to, again, direct our attention to the person of Jesus, who will then direct our attention to the actual cloud of witnesses who live around us that we can hold accountable and look at the fruit of the entirety of their life and decide, do I want to follow this person? Should you have teachers in your life? Yes. But you should have the opportunity to judge them by their fruit. You also, let me say this really clearly. If John 16 is right, you also have this Spirit inside of you, this Holy Spirit that will help guide you in discerning. Should I listen to this person? Is this who I want to have influence on my life? Is this someone that God has brought into my life to help influence my worldview and how I live? Or is this someone I should just let go of and look to the people around you? I just want to say maybe the elephant in the room, that I am a teacher. You're here today, sitting in chairs, listening to me talk. Why? I don't know. But I also want to say that I'm accountable. I'm accountable to people I'm accountable to you. That I say these things publicly and I stand in the lobby every week. So I want to face any music I need to face. There's also elders that we have at our church that every 5 years, they change out. They come from our community of people who I meet with twice a month who check in to make sure that I'm accountable. And when they asked me, how do we know if you're doing okay? What I told them was, ask my wife. She'll tell you. And believe me, she'll tell you. I am a teacher and I am accountable. I'm not your rabbi. Jesus is our rabbi. That my whole goal in life is to point us towards Jesus and to live in the space that exists between who we are and who we're becoming in the way of Jesus, and work together with us to close that gap. And so I wonder today on this Oculi Sunday, if we might consider what we long to see or how we long to see. and consider some of the influences in our life and in our world, to call them into question, to make them accountable to the fruit that's producing in their life and in ours. Who are you becoming? How are your people doing? Where are you intentionally present? And what might God be inviting you into? Hang on to those questions. I pray the Spirit of God would move in your life so profoundly that you could see what Jesus is doing in your actual life and participate in that. Amen? Let's sing together.